How do you live with integrity in a workplace that demands you affirm what you know is false? Every Monday morning, you walk into an environment where pronouns are mandatory, where questioning diversity metrics is career suicide, where silence itself is considered violence. Your HR department emails resources about white fragility. Your manager opens meetings with land acknowledgments. Your company's value statement reads like a graduate seminar in critical theory. And you feel it, that tightening in your chest, that careful self-editing before you speak, that exhausting mental calculation. Can I say this? Will this get me fired? How do I navigate this without destroying my career or betraying everything I believe? You're not alone in this. Millions of people across America sit in the exact same chair, facing the exact same impossible choice. Comply and feel like you're losing your soul piece by piece, or resist and risk losing everything you built. Here's what makes this so brutal. They've made disagreement itself seem like hatred. They've made tradition sound like bigotry. They've made common sense feel like a moral failing. And they've done it so effectively that even when you know something is wrong, you can't find the words to explain why without sounding like you're the problem. But there was a man who navigated this exact territory for 50 years and never bent. A philosopher who taught in universities dominated by the very ideology you're facing now, who was canceled before cancellation had a name, who lost positions, suffered media attacks, endured professional isolation, and never compromised an inch of truth. His name was Roger Scruton. And he didn't just survive hostile environments. He showed others how to preserve their humanity within them. Scruton spent the 1980s traveling secretly into communist Czechoslovakia and Poland, teaching philosophy to dissidents who risked prison for thinking freely. He knew what you're learning now. Sometimes the most important resistance happens not in grand gestures, but in small, daily refusals to let ideology colonize your soul. Today, I'm going to show you exactly how Scruton resisted, not with culture war talking points, not with political slogans, but with something far more powerful, a complete framework for maintaining your integrity, your sanity, and yes, your job, while refusing to affirm lies. If you've been feeling like you're going crazy, like you're the only one who sees that the emperor has no clothes, I need you to know something. Your intuition is correct. Your resistance to this ideology isn't a character flaw. It's intellectual and moral health. What Scruton offers isn't a weapon for fighting culture wars. It's something better, a way of seeing reality that makes you internally free, regardless of external pressure. When you understand his principles, you'll stop feeling defensive. You'll stop scrambling for arguments. You'll simply know how to be, and that being will be its own quiet resistance. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn Scruton's actual methodology, the one he taught to people living under totalitarianism, step by step, practically, starting with what to do tomorrow morning. If you want to discover how the greatest conservative minds navigated hostile cultures and maintained truth under pressure, subscribe to this channel where we explore thinkers who offer wisdom for impossible times. Now, before we get to tactics, you need to understand Scruton's fundamental insight, because if you don't grasp this, you'll just be swapping culture war talking points, and you'll lose. But once you see what Scruton saw, everything becomes clear. Here's what he understood. Woke ideology isn't primarily political. It's aesthetic and spiritual. It's a comprehensive vision of reality that must destroy beauty, tradition, and transcendence to survive. Notice something about your workplace wokeness. It's not just that they have different political opinions. It's that they've made ugliness mandatory. The corporate art is deliberately jarring. The language is intentionally graceless. People, color, folks, birthing people. The architecture. Look at your office building. Rejects any hint of the sacred or elevated. This isn't accidental. Scruton saw this pattern everywhere. Revolutionary ideologies always attack beauty first. Why? Because beauty points to something beyond ideology. When you experience genuine beauty, real architecture, real music, real art, you're encountering meaning that exists independently of political programs. Beauty whispers that there's an order to reality, a hierarchy of values, something transcendent. And that's intolerable to an ideology that insists reality is just power structures all the way down. Let me make this concrete. You know that feeling you get when you walk into a pre-war building with high ceilings and natural light versus the fluorescent-lit cube farm where you actually work? That feeling isn't nostalgia. It's your soul recognizing that one environment was built for human flourishing and the other was built for efficiency. Scruton would say, trust that feeling. Your aesthetic intuition is moral knowledge. Here's his first practical principle. Defend beauty as a form of truth. When your workplace eliminates beautiful things, when they replace the Christmas party with a winter celebration, when they remove classical music from the lobby, when they mandate that all company literature must feature photographs arranged by demographic percentages rather than aesthetic composition, they're not just being politically correct. They're trying to eliminate your access to transcendent meaning. Your first act of resistance is simply this. Notice the ugliness. Don't let them normalize it. Don't train yourself to stop seeing it. Scruton taught dissidents under communism. In an age of lies, noticing the truth is a revolutionary act. When your colleague says, "I love our new office design, all glass and steel and exposed ductwork," you don't need to argue. You don't need to explain postmodern architecture's deliberate rejection of human scale and ornament. You just need not affirm the lie. Smile, say nothing, or if pressed, I prefer buildings that feel like they were made for humans, not machines. Watch what happens. Your colleague will probably laugh nervously and change the subject. But something important just occurred. You didn't comply. You didn't affirm ugliness as beauty. You maintain your own aesthetic standards, which means you maintain access to transcendent meaning. This sounds small. It isn't, because the entire project of woke ideology requires getting you to call ugly things beautiful, false things true, degrading things noble. Once you accept that inversion, they own your mind. Scruton's dissidents knew this. They would gather in apartments to read banned books, to listen to real music, to look at reproductions of great paintings, not as political protest, but as spiritual survival. They were maintaining their soul's capacity to recognize beauty, which meant maintaining their capacity to recognize truth. You can do the same thing. Keep beautiful things in your life. Make your home beautiful even if your workplace is ugly. Listen to Bach in your car before walking into the office. Read real poetry, not corporate speak. Visit museums on weekends. You're not escaping. You're maintaining the internal standard that lets you recognize lies when you hear them. Because here's what Scruton knew. Once you lose your aesthetic sense, you lose everything. But if you keep it alive, no amount of ideological pressure can fully colonize your soul. Now let's talk about how you actually carry yourself in the workplace. Because this is where most people fail. They either capitulate completely or they turn every interaction into a confrontation. Scruton showed a third way. He called it living in truth with good humor. You know what's fascinating about Scruton's academic career? He spent 50 years teaching in universities that despised everything he stood for. 50 years. And he was never fired for his views. Know why? Because he mastered something crucial. The difference between principled resistance and performative rebellion. Here's the principle. Your refusal to comply should be so gracious and competent that punishing you reveals their authoritarianism, not your insubordination. Let me show you what this looks like practically. Your workplace mandates pronoun declarations in email signatures. This is the test case everyone's facing right now. What do? Wrong approach number 1. Aggressively refuse. I will not put pronouns in my signature because that's compelled speech, and it's insane to pretend biology doesn't exist, and congratulations. You just made it easy for them to label you a troublemaker, maybe even create an HR file. You lost. Wrong approach number 2. Comply while seething inside. Add him to your signature while feeling like you just betrayed yourself. Congratulations. You kept your job, but you hate yourself a little more. Also lost. Scruton's approach. Cheerful, competent non-compliance. You simply don't add pronouns. Not dramatically. Not with an explanation. You just don't do it. If someone asks about it, most won't. You smile and say, "Oh, I prefer to keep my signature simple and professional." Then immediately change the subject to work. Did you get a chance to review that report I sent? Notice what you did. You didn't lie. You didn't comply. You didn't fight. You maintained your standard while giving them nothing to weaponize. Most of the time, they'll let it go because the goal of these mandates isn't actually universal compliance. It's identifying the troublemakers. If you're not making trouble, if you're competent and pleasant and just quietly not participating, you fall below the enforcement threshold. Scruton saw this with dissidents. The totalitarian state couldn't possibly punish everyone who quietly refused. They had to focus on the loud resistors, the ones making it a confrontation, the quiet ones, the ones who simply lived according to different standards without broadcasting it, could maintain surprisingly large spaces of freedom. Here's your second practical principle. Be so good at your job that your noncompliance becomes costly to punish. This is crucial. You cannot resist from a position of mediocrity. If you're barely meeting expectations and also refusing pronouns, you're gone. But if you're the person who actually knows how the system works, who delivers results, who makes other people's jobs easier, suddenly, your quiet non-compliance on ideological matters becomes something management has to weigh against losing productivity. Scruton was never just a gadfly. He was a brilliant philosopher, a prolific author, a dedicated teacher. His competence made him expensive to cancel. They eventually did anyway, but it took them decades. You need to be in the same position. Excellence at your actual job buys you space for non-compliance on ideological demands. Third principle, control your face and your tone. Scruton had what people described as an almost supernatural calm. You could attack his ideas viciously, and he'd respond with bemused interest, as if you just said something rather curious. This is a skill you must develop, because when the DI trainer asks, "Does anyone have concerns about today's session?" your face cannot show contempt, even if you feel it. Your tone cannot be sarcastic. Even if sarcasm is your natural language, you must learn to say, "I'll need to think about that," with genuine thoughtfulness rather than obvious disagreement. You must learn to say, "That's an interesting perspective," without the slightest hint of irony. Why? Because you're not trying to win arguments. You're trying to preserve your internal freedom while maintaining your external position. Scruton knew the dissidents who survived were the ones who mastered their emotional presentation. This isn't dishonesty, it's prudence. There's a profound difference between affirming lies and simply not fighting every fight. Here comes a really interesting part. How do you know when to speak and when to stay silent? Scruton had a framework for this, developed from watching which dissidents thrived under communism and which ones ended up in prison. He taught them to distinguish between three types of situations and to respond differently to each. The first type is ideological ritual. This is the corporate diversity training, the land acknowledgement at the meeting, the email about Pride Month. The system isn't asking for your opinion. It's performing a ritual that establishes who has power. Scruton's principle. In pure ritual, your job is simply not to participate internally. You sit in the DI training. You don't argue. You don't ask pointed questions. You don't try to debate the trainer. But you also don't nod enthusiastically. You maintain what Scruton called courteous absence, physically present mentally elsewhere. Your face is neutral. If forced to do a breakout session exercise, you participate minimally, enough to not be marked as resistant, not enough to actually affirm anything false. Imagine you're visiting a foreign country with strange customs. You're polite, but you're not converting to their religion. That's the posture. The goal, get through it without either gaining an HR record or damaging your soul. Both are possible if you understand it's ritual, not argument. The second type is direct personal challenge. This is different. This is when someone specifically asks you, "Do you agree that our hiring should prioritize diversity over qualifications?" Or, "Don't you think white people need to do more to address their privilege?" Now you must speak. Silence here is compliance. But how you speak determines everything. Scruton's method was Socratic questioning. Never defend, always inquire. What do you mean by diversity? Are we talking about diversity of thought or diversity of demographics? What specific outcomes are we measuring to determine if someone is qualified? And how do those relate to demographic categories? When you say privilege, could you help me understand Are we talking about advantages that were earned or advantages that were unearned? Because the solutions would be different. Notice what you're doing. You're not saying that's wrong. You're asking for clarity. And the beauty of this approach is that their ideology cannot survive clarification. It requires vagueness to function. Most people will get uncomfortable and change the subject rather than try to define their terms precisely. You've resisted without becoming the bad guy. If they persist, Scruton's next move, shift from ideology to concrete reality. I guess I think about this differently. When I'm hiring, I'm looking for the person who can actually do the job well. Can you help me understand how I should weigh that against other considerations? You've just reframed from abstract ideological claims to specific practical questions. And on specific practical questions, reality is on your side. If you're recognizing that these principles require practice and courage, hit like, so the algorithm knows people need this kind of practical philosophical guidance. Share it with someone navigating similar workplace pressures. The third type is when you're asked for your genuine opinion. Very rarely. And you need to recognize it when it happens. Someone will actually want to know what you think. Not to trap you, not to perform virtue. Actually want to know. Maybe it's a younger colleague who's confused. Maybe it's someone who senses the ideology is wrong, but can't articulate why. Maybe it's even a manager who's privately skeptical. Scruton's principle here. When there's genuine openness, offer genuine truth, but offer it as invitation, not as weapon. You know, I think about this through the lens of human nature and what actually helps people flourish. And I'm not sure dividing people into identity categories and telling them they're either victims or oppressors actually serves anyone's well-being. Then you offer them Scruton. There's a philosopher named Roger Scruton who wrote beautifully about this. He talked about how we're losing the language to describe what really matters. Belonging, beauty, tradition, the things that actually make life meaningful. If you're interested, I could send you an article. Some will take it. Most won't. But your job isn't conversion. It's preserving and offering truth to those ready to receive it. Here's something Scruton understood that most workplace resistors miss. You cannot do this alone. You will break. The most important thing Scruton did in communist Eastern Europe wasn't teaching philosophy in secret apartments. It was building communities of people committed to truth, people who could look at each other and confirm, we're not crazy. Reality is real. Beauty exists. This ideology is lying. You need the same thing. Right now, you probably feel isolated. You look around your workplace and see either true believers or people who've given up. You feel like you're the only one who still thinks merit matters, that biology is real, that some things are objectively beautiful and true. But here's what I can promise you. You're not alone. In your workplace right now, there are other people who feel exactly what you feel. They're just as silent and isolated as you are. They're just as afraid. They're just as exhausted by the performance. Your job is to find them, carefully, prudently, but find them. Scruton's principle, build networks of normalcy. How do you do this without getting reported to HR? The same way dissidents did it under communism, through gradual trust building and plausible deniability. It starts with noticing who doesn't enthusiastically participate in the ideological rituals, who sits quietly in the DI training, who doesn't put pronouns in their signature, who changes the subject when political topics come up. Those are your people. Maybe, next step, casual conversations about normal things, not politics, not ideology, just reality. Talk about your actual family, not your chosen family. Mention church if you go, without apology. Reference classic books. Express appreciation for beautiful things without irony. You're putting out signals. I still live in the real world. Do you? If they respond positively, if their face shows relief, if they share something similar, you found someone, but still move slowly. Scruton taught dissidents 3 layers of relationship. Layer 1 is ordinary courtesy. You're pleasant, professional. You share normal human interactions about work, weather, life. You demonstrate you're a reasonable person. Layer 2 is shared aesthetic life. You invite them to normal human activities outside work, not political meetings, not even explicitly philosophical discussions, just A few of us are going to this museum exhibit on Saturday. Want to join? Or, I'm hosting a dinner party next month. We just eat good food and have actual conversations. Would you like to come? You're building what Scruton called civil society, the space between the state or corporation and the individual where real human flourishing happens. Layer 3 is explicit intellectual community. Once trust is established, you can go deeper. Have you ever read Scruton? I've been thinking about starting a small book group. Now you have what the dissidents had, a community that maintains sanity, a place where you can say what's true without fear, a place where beauty and meaning and tradition are normal, a place where you remember who you are. This isn't political organizing. It's not resistance cells. It's just normal human community, the kind that existed everywhere until about 15 years ago. The kind woke ideology specifically targets because it creates loyalties beyond ideology. Here's what will happen. Your Monday mornings will stop feeling suffocating because you'll walk into that workplace knowing that on Saturday, you're having dinner with people who still know that reality is real. You'll sit through the DI training knowing that tomorrow, your book group is discussing Scruton's chapter on beauty. The ideology hasn't changed. Your workplace hasn't changed, but you're no longer isolated, and that changes everything. Scruton watched this happen in Eastern Europe. The communist state controlled everything: jobs, housing, education, media. Everything except the small communities that gathered in apartments to read banned books and listen to forbidden music. And you know what? Those communities survived. The totalitarian state didn't. Because you can control institutions, but you can't finally control the human heart's hunger for truth, beauty, and real community. Build your community. It's not optional. It's survival. We need to talk about something Scruton emphasized constantly. You're not going to reverse the corporate woke takeover next quarter. You're probably not going to reverse it in your lifetime. And that's okay, because you're playing a different game than they are. They're playing for institutional control. You're playing for civilizational preservation. These are completely different time horizons with completely different victory conditions. Here's Scruton's most important principle, the one that kept dissidents sane under decades of totalitarian control. When you cannot change the culture, embody the alternative. Think about what this means. You cannot make your corporation drop its DI requirements. You cannot force them to stop the land acknowledgements. You cannot prevent them from making every decision through the lens of identity politics. But you can do something far more important. You can live as though those things don't define reality. You can build a life right now that reflects the actual truth about human flourishing. Scruton spent the 1990s and 2000s writing about this beautifully. He'd won. In a sense, communism had fallen. The dissidents were free. But he noticed something troubling. The West was voluntarily adopting the same spiritual emptiness the East had been forced to endure. So he shifted his focus, showing people how to build beautiful lives in an ugly culture, how to create homes that reflected permanent values, how to cultivate meaningful work, how to raise children who could recognize beauty and truth, how to preserve high culture when the institutions had abandoned it. This is your actual task, not winning arguments at work. Not changing corporate policy, but this: making your home a refuge of beauty and meaning, making your family life rich with tradition and genuine relationship, making your work, whatever it is, an expression of excellence and virtue. Let me make this concrete with Scruton's own example. He lived in rural England, in a house he made beautiful. Not expensively, he wasn't wealthy, but thoughtfully. He had a wine cellar. He hunted, he played music, he maintained rituals, afternoon tea, Sunday dinners, seasonal celebrations. He read great books, he attended church, he cultivated gardens. His life was a standing argument against modernity's claims. You don't need their ideology to live well. In fact, their ideology makes living well impossible. But the old ways, beauty, tradition, community, transcendence, still work. Still produce human flourishing, still create meaning. Your workplace is temporary. Your career is temporary. Even your current civilization is temporary. But the principles Scruton defended, these are permanent. And someone has to embody them, preserve them, pass them on. That someone is you. So here's what this looks like practically. Your corporation celebrates Pride Month with rainbow flags everywhere. You don't argue. You don't protest. You go home and you read your children a fairy tale that teaches permanent truths about good and evil, beauty and ugliness, courage and cowardice. Your workplace forces you through training on deconstructing Western civilization. You sit through it with courteous absence. Then you spend your weekend visiting a cathedral, teaching yourself to recognize why its beauty matters, understanding what it means that our ancestors built such things. Your company insists that all value is socially constructed. You maintain a garden where you encounter the stubborn reality that plants grow according to nature's laws, not human wishes. You cook meals where you discover that some flavor combinations are objectively better than others. You learn a craft where you find that quality is real and recognizable. You are creating what Scruton called small platoons, Benedict option communities before that phrase existed, little outposts of civilization, places where your children learn what human excellence looks like, places where beauty is cultivated, places where tradition is honored, places where truth is spoken. And here's what Scruton promised, based on watching it happen in Eastern Europe. These small places preserve the seeds. When the ideological winter finally ends, and it will end because all lies eventually collapse under the weight of reality, these seeds will be ready to plant. You're not fighting for next quarter's corporate culture. You're preserving civilization for the next generation, maybe the generation after that. This is not defeat. This is playing the long game, and Scruton proved it works. How do you live in a world where your workplace demands you affirm what you know is false? Scruton answered that question by showing it's actually the wrong question. The real question is, how do you preserve your humanity when institutions have lost theirs? And the answer isn't complicated. It's just hard. You maintain your aesthetic sense, your ability to recognize beauty and recoil from ugliness. You practice cheerful noncompliance, gracious refusal to participate in lies. You distinguish between ritual, where you stay silent, direct challenge, where you ask questions, and genuine openness, where you offer truth. You build communities of normalcy with others who still know reality is real. And you play the long game, embodying in your own life the civilization your workplace has abandoned. This isn't a culture war strategy. It's older and deeper than that. It's what human beings have always done when powerful institutions demand compliance with unreality. It's what dissidents did under totalitarianism. It's what Christians did under Rome. It's what every person who valued truth over comfort has done throughout history. Scruton didn't invent this. He just saw it clearly and articulated it beautifully, and lived it consistently for 50 years in hostile territory. What he proved is this: they can control your workplace. They can control your corporation. They can even control your words in public spaces. But they cannot control your soul unless you let them. And you don't have to let them. Your job tomorrow morning isn't to save your company from woke ideology. Your job is simpler and harder. Walk in there with your soul intact. Speak truth when you must. Stay silent when you should. Do excellent work. Build friendships with others who haven't bent. Go home and create something beautiful. That's it. That's the whole strategy. It sounds small, but Scruton watched small acts of preservation defeat the Soviet Union. He watched people who simply refused to let the lies colonize their inner lives outlast an empire. You can outlast this too, not by fighting every fight, not by winning arguments, but by maintaining, quietly and persistently, your connection to what's real, true, and beautiful. When your corporation is long forgotten, when this particular ideological wave has crashed and receded, when historians are writing about this strange period when Western institutions lost their minds, the thing that will have mattered is whether you preserved your humanity. Scruton showed you how. Now you just have to do it. Starting tomorrow morning, when you walk into that workplace, you'll remember that Scruton taught us this. The most powerful resistance is living as though the ideology doesn't define reality, because it doesn't. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to remember these 4 things. First, trust your aesthetic sense. When they show you something ugly and call it beautiful, notice the ugliness. Don't let them train you out of that recognition. Your ability to see beauty is your connection to transcendent truth. Second, master cheerful noncompliance. Don't fight every fight. Don't perform rebellion. Just quietly maintain your standards while being so competent they can't afford to lose you. Third, distinguish your responses. In ideological ritual, be courteously absent. In direct challenge, ask clarifying questions that expose the ideology's incoherence. In genuine openness, offer truth as invitation. Fourth, build your community and your home. Find the others who haven't been. Create spaces where beauty, tradition, and truth are normal. Make your actual life a standing refutation of their claims about human flourishing. In the coming weeks, you'll notice something shift. The workplace won't change, but your relationship to it will. You'll stop feeling defensive and start feeling free. Because you'll know what Scruton knew. They have power over your paycheck, but they have no power over your soul unless you give it to them. And when you doubt, when it feels too hard, when you're tempted to either fight foolishly or surrender completely, ask yourself, what would Scruton do? The answer is always the same. Maintain beauty. Speak truth. Build community. Play the long game. And do it all with grace that makes their authoritarianism visible and your resistance undeniable. There's a phrase from Scruton I can't forget. He wrote, "Beauty is the glimpse of the divine in the ordinary world, and it's therefore a standing reproach to those who would tell us that the world has no meaning." Do you feel the weight of that truth? Your workplace insists meaning is just power structures. But every time you encounter something genuinely beautiful, every time you're moved by music, stunned by architecture, arrested by a sunset, reality itself is refuting their claim. That's why they attack beauty. That's why they make ugliness mandatory. Because beauty keeps whispering. There's something more. There's an order. There's meaning beyond ideology. And that whisper is the most dangerous thing in the world to people who need you to believe lies. Imagine your life 6 months from now after embodying these principles. You won't have changed your company. Scruton never promised you could, but you'll be internally free. You'll walk into work without that tightness in your chest. You'll navigate the rituals without losing yourself. You'll have found your people. And you'll go home to a life that reflects actual human flourishing, not ideology's counterfeit. This channel exists to discover together the wisdom of thinkers like Roger Scruton. People who face the same pressure to affirm lies that you face, and who showed us how to remain free. Subscribe if you want to continue this journey of intellectual resistance and practical wisdom. In the next video, we'll explore how Scruton's understanding of beauty can transform your home, your work, and your entire way of seeing the world. See you there. And meanwhile, may beauty sustain you, truth guide you, and the long view keep you sane.